Welcome to the Retail Navigator Podcast, where we're charting the course for retail growth. Join us as we bring together retail industry leaders, economic development professionals, and real estate investors to share the strategies driving success in today's retail landscape. We cover subjects like selection secrets, city incentives, and lease negotiation wins. This podcast is about navigating the insights that matter most to retail professionals and commercial real estate investors.
Welcome, everybody, to the Retail Navigator Podcast. I'm your host, Joseph Gazan, and today we have Monte. Monte is the EDC Director and the City Administrator for the city of Howe, Texas. It's Howe. Nobody in Texas knows how to spell it except the locals. Monte, welcome to the show.
Howe. Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So Howe, Texas sits right on the 75 highway corridor between North McKinney to Sherman, closer to the Sherman side of things. And I heard you say that the other day. It's kind of like you're in the path of growth and it's inevitable to grow. So give us a few minutes about you and a little bit how you got it to be the EDC person in Howe, and a little bit about the community.
Yeah, I grew up here in Howe. My family's been here since, I think, 1895, something like that. So we're rooted into the area. Matter of fact, one of our streets that are being repaired right now is named after my great-grandfather. So it's neat to be able to serve the community in which helped me become who I am. Especially in a small town, you're cultivated from that community, being a small community, and to be able to give back has been amazing. That comes with challenges when everybody knows who you are and they know your history and they knew you when you were in high school and in some senses in elementary school. Yeah, but it's been a lot of fun. I did come back and started as the EDC director, as you mentioned, back in 2014. I started part-time, and October of 15, I started full-time as the EDC director. And in a small town, you can either sit around and twiddle your thumbs or you can find projects to do. We were very fortunate at that time. The Chamber of Commerce had a history of going in and out during financial times, and during recessions, they would go out and then they'd reappear during good times. And it was just reorganized 4 or 5 times since the 1960s. And it had not been I guess it went out in 2009 during the housing crisis. They just abandoned it. So in 2015, one of the first things I wanted to do is restart the Chamber of Commerce. And I gathered about, 6 board members that were young business leaders and locked them in a room and said, when we come out, we're going to have some bylaws. And we did. They were absolutely excellent. And I know one of them still with me today as I serve as the president of the Chamber of Commerce as well. But we've been in existence now for 10 years straight, which has been unheard of for the city of Howe. And I don't anticipate it ever going in and out ever again. With the way we're growing and going to grow, it'll be successful for a very long time. Another project that I was able to look at was revamping our downtown. When I came on board, there were maybe 1 or 2 businesses downtown at the time, and a lot of empty spaces, and the buildings were not in great shape. So we were able to, even with private money, just redevelop our downtown. And if you drive down there today, it's hard to find a parking space. And that's a good sign. I remember the first day, once we finished that project, my parents and I had lunch downtown, and we walked outside and we were all in shock because it was just full. And that was very rewarding to see that happen. Because at one point, Howe being so close to Sherman, but at one point, Howe had numerous businesses downtown. And somewhere in the 90s with Walmart and Sherman, and a lot of those businesses just went away. So to bring that back was very satisfying, gratifying to be able to accomplish that. And now we're out of space. I have no vacancy. I need more buildings. It's going to be fun over the next 10 years to even add to that situation. So once we revitalized the downtown, we had this old historic church building built in 1893, and it was dedicated to the city back in about 1982 after the church disbanded. You could see it in its day. It was a beautiful building, but it had not been maintained. It had varmints living in it. It was just disgusting. It really was. And so I had every little old lady in town coming to my office and saying, we have to do something with this church because I'm afraid it's going to get torn down. So what are we going to do? And with our city being the size it is, and you can imagine the budget that it has, I was forced to tell them, you're going to have to put your money where your mouth is. And it's going to take a lot of elbow grease to get this thing to where it needs to be. And so we formed a committee called the Howe Development Foundation, put together a Save the Church committee, and we had a live auction, a silent auction, and we had all you can eat barbecue one night. We raised $50,000 that one evening, and then we had another one. We raised another 25, and we had two older master craftsmen that said, "Hey, we'll donate our time if you'll provide the materials." So that saved a ton of money. When you're working with volunteers like that, it doesn't happen overnight. It took us about 4 years or so, but we now have that old church building, and it is an anchor near our downtown, and it's beautiful. It has the original 1893 shiplap inside. We now hold our city council meetings there. All of our Chamber of Commerce events are there. For a little bit before I became the city administrator, my EDC office was in there. And we also had rented out for events, birthday parties, weddings, and all kinds of things. So that went from a building that was about to be torn down to a iconic piece of our downtown. So that's another thing that I'm really proud of. And now that's gotten us to the point of where we knew we were going to go, which is the growth of the city up that 75 corridor. We knew at a period of time we were going to be affected by that. And today's the day, so to speak, because a couple of weeks ago, really the only thing that's been holding us back over the years is the lack of a wastewater treatment plant. And we'll get into that here just a little bit later, I'm sure.
Yeah, awesome. So that was a lot, right?
That was a lot.
That was a lot. So let's recap a little bit. You grew up in town, which is awesome, and you were about my age, so I'm sure you're very thankful to the fact that we didn't have video cameras all around when we grew up, because that would have made your situation probably worse right now.
If we had video cameras when we were growing up, I wouldn't be sitting in the same seat that I am right now. Probably
I don't think
not.
anybody would have. It's a great story about how the community came together and really cared about downtown, cared about bringing back those businesses and driving the community to have a place. And the old church, it's really sad that we lose a lot of those old architecture, really nice buildings when they can be repurposed into something that is useful for the community. And I'm glad that your community got together and brought it back to life. So Howe is really small right now. Like the population of Howe right now, how big it is?
3,900 population right now. I think if you looked at a demographic, it would say 3,600, but we're adding homes every day. So 3,900 is probably a good guess for today.
So in Texas, that's a very small number, right?
Yeah.
And you could call it a rural community, but physically, Howe is located on one of the biggest corridors, highway-wise, on Interstate 75, right? That goes all the way up to Oklahoma. There's a lot of traffic on that highway, which, to quote you again, it's inevitable that town is going to grow at some point. And what was stopping Howe from growing all those years? Because in the last maybe 20 years, DFW, the entire Metroplex, just grew insanely, right? What was the big obstacle? What was the reason why Howe didn't grow so far?
Yeah, the number one reason is the lack of a wastewater treatment plant. Back in the 1960s, Howe, always the leadership here wanted to be a bedroom community. That was the goal. That's why we don't have a lot of retail at the current moment. But in the 1960s, they decided to go in with Sherman and get rid of their wastewater treatment plant, tie in with Sherman, and let Sherman basically be the wholesaler. And but the problem with that is you lose your sovereignty, so to speak, because you can't manage your own future because there's a limit on what kind of wastewater you can send to another community. And Howe was in that situation. We've recently alleviated that. It's been a priority for Howe for 40 years. You can read back 40 years ago this week on the local newspaper, and they were talking about the same thing, trying to figure out how to build a wastewater treatment plant. And 2 weeks ago, we were able to get that monkey off our back. We went with a third party called BVRT2, contracted with them, where they will purchase the land, they will do the permitting for us, they will construct, manage, and operate a wastewater treatment plant, not only one, but two, one on each side of Howe, one on the north side, one on the south side. And now we're open for business, for residential, for commercial, for whatever you got. We're in the game. And that was the only thing keeping us out of the for so many years.
And that is something that a lot of people don't realize, right? It's kind of, oh, I
Yeah.
want to build, I have land, I'm going to build. It's not that simple.
No,
A city has a set of utilities that it has to provide and services that it has to provide in order for us to build a subdivision, right? Because I know we're focused on retail and focused on commercial real estate, but if there's no people, there's no businesses. If there's no businesses, there's no need for retail. And it starts with the people. It starts with the neighborhoods, the subdivisions, and you can't build a whole subdivision with smaller lots and be everything on septic. It's just not realistic. Water treatment and sewer services is something that is critical that the city provides in order for a developer to come in and say, okay, I will buy this piece of land and I'm going to build a subdivision so I can build a lot of homes on it and sell it. So that's been an obstacle for you to grow. And now that this is out of the way, so to speak, what is on the books, right? How many more roofs are planned to be built in Howe, Texas in the next few years?
So we plan to be at a population of 15,000, growing steadily towards that number for the next 7 to 10 years. With the development agreements we have in place right now, that'll get us to that number at their build out of all their phases that we have on the books today. That's not including people that we're just kicking the tires with right now. As soon as we get to that 15,000, we'll be talking about 30. And when we get to 30, we'll be talking about 60. That's the kind of growth that we're about to have here in Howe, Texas. So to answer your question, we're going to get to 15,000 initially, and that'll happen pretty quickly. And everybody in town for a number of years, ever since I started, they need a grocery store. They want a grocery store. I hear it 3 times a day before my head hits the pillow. I hear, Monty, when are we going to get a grocery store? So those are some of the challenges, and they don't like hearing. I remember one lady, I told her, she said, what do we have to do to get a grocery store? And I said, we're going to have probably about 5,000 to 7,000 more people. And she said, I want that. That's how you're going to get it. So it doesn't come, as you said, it doesn't come without the other. Rooftops generate those kind of retail opportunities. And so we're focusing on that. And we know that the retail will come. We just signed 7-Eleven and a Taco Bell. Those are the first two. And they're generally the first two in a lot of small communities that are growing. So we're no different in that area, but we're going to add to that tremendously as we go. Those are just the first two of very many.
Yeah. And it's funny because it's a recurring theme. Every small town that I ever talk to, that their first thing on that want list is a grocery store. And like you said, a grocery retailer, and there's different sizes of the grocery retailers, right? But they start at around 10,000 people. Under that, the logistics just doesn't make sense. So,
and it's different. And it's different today than it was, say, 20, 30 years ago, because there's so much data available at their fingertips. 30 years ago, they might look at Howe and say, that's a growing community. There's a lot of upside there. We're going to take a chance and go ahead and go in there knowing that it's going to grow. Whereas today, they have so much information. They can tell you, if I'm going to be on this corner, I'm going to make 3%. But if I go across the highway on this corner, I'm going to make 5%. And they have every demographic. They have better ETJ maps and city maps than we do. So a lot of the retailers are highly educated, and they know whether they're going to make it or not before they make that next step. To know that we've got some high-end retailers coming is a good sign for us that we meet all of those needs for those retail developers, and it's only going to get better.
Yeah. What are you guys doing as a city right now that you finally went through the water treatment obstacle? You know that there is about 15,000 roofs coming in the next 7 to 10 years. How do you reach out? How do you work on, as a city, to attract the retail to come to town? Do you work with the developers? Do you work with brokers? I know because I know the answer, but I'm asking so our listeners will know as well.
Yeah, that's a good question. And these days, there are specialists within the developer groups. And so a lot of times the developers will front these things for you. Now you just have to, on the back end, decide, is that something that the city of Howe really wants? But the developers play a big part of this thing. And EDC directors and presidents get a lot of credit sometimes for what the developers are doing. And that's okay. And as long as the end goal is obtained, I think everybody's okay with that. But yeah, we do our things as far as reaching out. We make contacts and tapping on shoulders and trying to provide the best information and data to some of these retailers that we want to attract. So we do go to the trade shows. We do visit with those folks. But we also, one of the trade shows I went to recently, one of the developers that have a retail component to their development, we partnered up and we went on visits together to some of these retailers. So I think it's a team effort. If you can partner with your developers on attracting what both want, that makes it a lot easier.
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously, our listeners that are on the retail side of things and the developer side of things, they want to know what kind of tools are in your belt in order to make that business case look better, right? DFW is growing. There's still a lot of land because it's still Texas, right? So a developer that wants to build a Taco Bell can choose to build anywhere from McKinney to Sherman. Why stop at Howe? What is the reason for them to come in? And other than the fact that community is growing, usually EDCs have other incentives that they can offer. And what kind of, and I'm not asking specifically what Howe is offering today. I'm just talking to as an experienced EDC person. Like, what kind of tools do you think are good in order to attract a major brand retail and so on?
So it is challenging, especially on a small city side of things. We don't, we certainly don't generate $2 million a month in sales tax revenue like some nearby cities do, or 3 million a month, and as one does. So we have to be a little bit creative. We haven't done a whole lot in the past. We anticipate being able to do 380 agreements. We're not opposed to a TERS section for if it makes the right sense. We're not opposed to getting in those financial mechanisms to entice the right person. Now, we also, Grayson County is unique because Grayson County will help us on some TERS funding as well. They'll contribute to some of that. So there's a certain percentage we can ask the county to get involved. Now it's up to the county commissioners to whether they want to proceed with that, but we have the ability to ask the county to contribute to a TERS fund. So we're gonna ask all the right things for the right type of businesses that we want. We'll bend over backwards the best we can with what we have and the tools that we are able to use. But yeah, I wouldn't discourage anyone just because of the size of our sales tax, because we do have a little bit, but as far as handing out cash, that's probably not an option. But there are incentives as far as 380 agreement, TERS agreements, and things like that'll save them down the road.
So for our listeners that are not familiar with the industry acronyms, a TER, a tax incentive, how does that work? Give us the quick rundown.
Yeah, tax incentive reinvestment zone. It's incremental. It grows incrementally. Those things you're able to reimburse on infrastructure, putting in water lines, sewer lines, things like that. Now, sewer is going to be different for us because our third party will be able to provide some of those things. But that's basically, it's an incremental growth, and those funds that grow over that initial valuation point will grow in a separate fund that can go towards that particular development. So it's a big tool to have in the tool belt for retail. It's so big, and it's such a nice piece of legislation that some of the residential developers are trying to get involved in these TERS. And there are some restrictions on the levels of single family residential neighborhoods, being in a TERS, things like that. But it's a nice outfit for especially business. And I can foresee us at some point having a reinvestment zone that covers a lot of 75 because we're still, we're rare in the fact that we're somewhat of a blank sheet of paper on a major thoroughfare. And if so, we can control and predict what we want on that huge ribbon of commerce that we've been blessed with that runs right through the heart of our city. So in order to get it right, we'll make the right choices and we'll bend over backwards to try to do some of those things.
Thank you. And we always emphasize that a good EDC cannot work in a vacuum, right? They need the support of the city council and the mayor and the city manager. Now, you being the city manager, city administrator helps a lot, right? But
Yeah.
you had a recent change in regime, right? You have a new mayor and she's been pushing too. How is the city government, the city council and the mayor approach to growth is right now?
Right now, it's very positive. The bedroom community vision is in the rear view mirror. That no longer is a topic of discussion when we're talking about the future of Howe, Texas. $35 billion being invested just to our north certainly helps in that. It's 4 miles to our north, by the way. I'm talking about Texas Instruments and Global Wafers. Those are huge. That's going to bring a lot of wealth opportunities to our community. Years
They're opening
ago,
their doors this year, right? Towards the end of the year?
phase one, yes.
Yes.
Now, Global Wafers has already started producing. They made a big announcement with their first semiconductor. So that was pretty exciting to see. But those opportunities are going to bring a lot of wealth and a lot of highly skilled kids for generations. When I talked about when I went to school here, TI, like I said, just up the road from us, all of my friends' parents were employed by TI. It's a lot of engineers. So a lot of my peers were kids of engineers. Therefore, the education level and how we had by far the best test scores and everybody wanted to put their kids in Howe because we had really smart kids. And as TI floated away and went down, now that's going to come back. So we're excited about not only where our city's going to go and the wealth that it provides, but also our school district. We're going to start producing some really high level students out of Howe High School. Now, we've continued that. I'm not saying that we haven't over the years, but it's going to even escalate as we flood our school district with these highly skilled engineer type brains that are going into our school district. And that's going to be exciting to see. So Howe's a great destination point for a number of reasons. And I don't know how I got off on that tangent. You might remind me of the original question. I tend to do that at times.
That's okay. No, we were talking about the growth on the corridor and we were talking about Texas Instruments coming to town. And that is great news for Howe, of course. TI, you mentioned, is Texas Instruments. They're opening a massive manufacturing facility south of Sherman. And that's going to bring growth to the entire area over there. And obviously, that's why you guys went from 0 to 15,000 roofs on the books in no time, as soon as you took off the water treatment obstacle off the table.
Yeah. We're going to have some great conversations in 15 years about how we got from point A to point B. We're going to be having similar conversations that they're having just south of us in Anna and Melissa. And we can't do the things because of the legislature. We're never going to be able to be like a Frisco or a McKinney and grow to that size just because of the limitations of the legislature over the past several sessions. So our county will always have a larger footprint in Grayson County than Collin County will. But with that being said, that doesn't mean that we're not going to be able to max out what we can. And when we get 15, 20 years down the road, we're going to have an interesting conversation about how it all started in 2025.
Are you referring, when you mentioned the legislature, are you referring to the fact that cities cannot force annexation anymore?
Yeah, that's part of it. Yeah, the forced annexation, the being able to jump out of the ETJ. We're very fortunate. We've had only one landowner that backed out of our ETJ, but that was a significant portion of land. It's 500 acres But I know some other cities who have a pile of about 12 stacked up on their desk, and we're fortunate we're not in that situation.
Yes. And
Yeah.
to the listeners that are not sure what an ETJ is, it's extraterritorial jurisdiction. It's the areas that are not inside the city limits, but were earmarked for the city. And the city can choose if they want to annex that section into the city limits and what comes with it, right? So if a piece of land is being annexed to the city, now the city has to service it with the water, the sewer, and so on. While if it's in the county, then the city doesn't have to. But in return, my piece of land is outside in the county, then I don't have to adhere to any zoning laws and regulations that are put in place by the city. So there's benefits, pros and cons to being inside the city limits or outside the city limits. And up until recent legislator, like Monte mentioned, I had no choice. If I was earmarked for the city and the city decided it's time to take it into city limits, they could force the action. There used to be deed restriction that would force that annexation on sale. And then recent legislator took this thing off and said, wait a second, you cannot force a landowner to become part of the city if he was never part of the city. Does that sum it right correctly, Monte?
That's exactly right.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
I want to be conscious of your time and make sure that we kind of give you a little bit of time to highlight the city, right? If you want to address
love doing
retail
that.
brands, if you want to address retail brands, if you want to address developers and brokers and tell them why they should come and visit with you, visit the city of Howe, and definitely invest in the city of town. The floor is yours.
Yeah. And of course, every citizen we have, and this is true, I think, in every market, the first thing they want is a Chick-fil-A and a Whataburger. Our citizens are no different. Those are the top two. But as far as the city of Howe, the growth opportunities here, especially, I guess it's a positive as much as it is a negative, talking about the forced annexation, because if you're able to live in Howe, and we're getting a lot of people coming from Collin County because they're tired of the 40-foot lots and the 50-foot lots, that they want to come up here and be able to breathe. So we don't want to lose that aspect of our community while we are going to have some higher density neighborhoods, certainly, but we're not going to be able to grow to the extent where it's all the way out touching the next city. So there's still a lot of opportunities for acre lots, which is very popular up here. Now, you can't have your whole city be acre lots, or it's not very conducive to growing financially, obviously, but it is good for a lot of citizens, especially in Collin County, looking to get away from that. We want to be a destination where people want to go and be able to have some different opportunities other than just concrete everywhere. With that being said, we're open obviously to single family developments, certain types of multifamily developments, but our school district, this community has always hung our hat on our kids. And I hope that never changes. We have a very big school district that touches east of 75 and goes west of 289. It's a very large school district. And with the type of students that we'll be providing over the next few years into that school district, that's the number one thing that citizens want to look at. First thing they do is they look at your parks and your schools before they look at anything else. The schools, we can check that. We're in the A+ category with our schools. Parks we're a little bit behind on. We've got some areas to work on with parks, although we did just open Connections Park, which is a beautiful site. It's got a playground, tennis courts, all those kind of luxuries that you anticipate today.
And we have another community project.
It was,
right?
Yeah, that was a community project. We had a private investor and some partnerships with Texoma Health Foundation that saw that through. Some of it's still under construction. That they went in phases, but the community got together and built the playground set, and that was pretty amazing. It was a great afternoon, a week-long project where community members actually did all the sawing and the drilling and put that thing together, and it's really a heartwarming situation to see those connections made. But we also have 46 acres of city-owned property that we want to develop into our Central Park. So when we're talking about these developments with higher density, if they want to, instead of having a pocket park on the development, if they want to make a contribution towards our Central Park, we're open to those opportunities as well. We've got our ball fields right on Highway 75 for our youth baseball. And so we don't want that. We want to have your typical quad complex and your softball and be able to provide that in our Central Park. And that opens up some area along 75 where we can develop some retail and things like that. So there's going to be some trade-offs, and those are opportunities we'll look at as we grow. But how overall, what you're getting in a community in 2025 is one that's close knit. I think we've got 7 churches in town. They always say in Texas, you can tell what kind of community you have by how many churches you have. So that's the community that we do have. And I hope that doesn't change. You're going to have changes as you grow and you get bigger. And we still want to maintain our quality of life and the values of the people coming together, and such as we were talking about with Connections Park. And we hope that never changes, because there's a lot of really good salt of the earth people in Howe, Texas. And we want to continue to attract those type of people here. There's a lot of opportunities in workforce with Sherman Denison. And then also you can go south to Collin County and you can live not in the hustle and bustle, and commute just a few minutes away from a lot of good job opportunities. But with that being said, we've also got to work on growing our job base here in Howe, Texas as well. We don't want everybody commuting.
Yes. Yeah, but it's easy, right? You get out of town, you get on 75, and within minutes, like I said, you're in Sherman on the north, or you're in Anna and Melissa and McKinney on the south, no more than 7, 8, 10 minutes tops. And you recently had the event at the town where you represented all the new developments that are coming in. And one of the speakers was the Texas Department of Transportation engineer that was talking about how 75 is going to grow again, all the way from McKinney to 75. They're going to expand it and going to make it much more accessible with a few new ramps that will help people in and out of town.
Yeah, this past week, they actually started that construction at the county line. Of course, we'll be going from 4 lanes to 6 lanes, all the way through Van Alstyne to Howe, up to 1417, the initial phase, and then on. They've already constructed some of the work in Sherman to make that expansion. Anytime you expand your highway from 4 lanes to 6 lanes, that brings a lot of opportunities. You can see what happened when they did that in Anna. You've got to have great ability to get to your home, especially if you're working outside of your hometown. And so as those things expand, the opportunities to grab more citizens opens up for us. And we are very thankful for this expansion of 75.
Yes, and this is something that you got to give the Texas DOT some credit. They get a lot of crap being a government agency, right? But seem to get ahead of the ball whenever they can. And they've done that with the Dallas Tollway, where they build the Universal Themes Park, and they're doing it on 380 right now, and they're doing it on 75. They know how it's going to explode. Anna is already exploding. Van Iseltine is in the middle there. It's going to grow. So they go ahead, and like I said, they started the construction this week. So they're not waiting for you to have 5,000 more people congesting 75 before they get to work. They're already working on it. So they give them a little credit here.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is frustrating at times because it's just a government work. You're always behind a cycle or two in the funding that you need in order to make things work. And I'm always, a lot of EDC directors and city managers are always looking 10, 15, 20 years down the road, projecting how you're going to build this thing out. And so I know 7 years ago, I was in front of our metropolitan planning organization trying to get extra ramps placed at intersections that I knew were going to be heavily trafficked intersections, just like the one in Anna that was there for a while. The exit ramp for their main hub there, people were backed up on 75 about a mile back on the shoulder of the highway. And I know there's an exit like that in Howe that's going to be that way. So we're trying to address that now so that we don't get into that situation where we have to fix that when there's already cars lined up a mile back on the shoulder. It makes for a very dangerous situation. So anytime we can get in front of it and give them that information, that only helps. And we just hope that they're able to have the same vision and funding to be able to make those things happen out in front. They do a great job of trying to make those things work.
Yeah. Monte, thank you so much for coming up on the show. And if any developer or retail brand out there wants to reach out and say hi, how can they find you?
They can find me. I'm on our city website, which is cityofhowetx.gov. My email's on there. Our phone number is on there, 903-532-5571. Be happy to talk to anyone who's looking at bettering the city of Howe, because that's exactly what I want to do. So we'd be great partners.
Perfect. Monte, thank you so much for coming up on the show. And for you, the listeners, if you want to hear more stories about retail and cities and economic development opportunities and just retail brands information, just subscribe to the podcast anywhere you consume your podcast, whether it's Apple Podcast, iTunes, Teachers, and so on. We're everywhere. Until next time, thank you so much.